let's talk about RFK Jr. This is gross. This is just super gross. But I mean, not terribly surprising. There's been different reports. Well, let's listen to RFK and Tucker Carlson talk about what RFK is supposedly going to do if Donald Trump becomes president. First off, aside from RFK now and his media enterprise trying to make it like Olivia Nuzzi, the reporter in which RFK apparently shared texts back and forth in terms of like sexting with each other.
Yeah.
He is now claiming that she was obsessed with him, sending nude pictures without his consent. Apparently, it's a weird, the timeline's weird. Apparently, he blocked her and then unblocked her. She sent him nude pic. This is according to him, I guess, or people from his camp sent her nude pictures, and then he couldn't block her again or something.
That's so odd.
I would just say
it's so weird.
Yeah, like,
but that's why he wants to get into the administration so that he can help appoint who should be in these bureaucracies that don't allow him to block his phone when people are sending him nude pictures. It's one of the things that's got to be on the checklist. But here he is with Tucker Carlson making that case.
How do you envision your role in a Trump administration?
President Trump has asked me specifically to do two things. One, to help unravel the capture of the agencies by corrupt influence. In other words, to drain the swamp.
Pause it. Let's be clear. What does that mean? There is industrial capture, regulatory capture is what they call it, where the promise of a job from industry means that the leadership of the agencies don't go too hard against these agencies. It's really basically bribe in one form or another. The idea that money is going to influence the actions of these bureaucrats. They're politicians, but they're appointed. These bureaucrats, that money is going to influence them. Like, imagine for a minute that you were a candidate running for office, and you need money. So it's like, it would be like as if you chose your vice president based upon how much money that person could give you. Like, that type of dynamic is, I guess, what he's talking about. Like, if you chose your vice president who really had no political experience, no prominent public service, not even a public profile that could help you in some way win, it was just like you did it because I like this person and there's money to be made here. I can get money for my campaign if I basically sell off my vice presidency, which, of course, that would be a real breach of trust between you and your voters because your vice president could replace you. That's the dynamic that I think Kennedy is talking about.
And I had to say something about President Trump. President Trump has some extraordinary gifts, and one of them is that he has very, very good instincts. And that when he came out the first time, you remember, he was very against the lockdowns publicly. He was for hydroxychloroquine. He was for alternative medicines. He was against the masks. He was doing, but he was surrounded by bureaucrats who, and knowledgeable experts who, ultimately pushed back on those assumptions and got us into some policies that I
What were the assumptions
think were really bad for.
I thought you thought it was over. What were the assumptions Trump was making in terms of, like, the experts, right? Like he's saying accurately, people like Dr. Anthony Fauci were encouraging masking. They were encouraging social distancing. They were encouraging people to stay home if they had the ability to do so. That's what the experts were saying. What Donald Trump was saying was inject bleach into yourself.
Well, I was also saying leave the people on the boat, because if you bring the people in, then there's more COVID. So leave them on the boat. I don't want to count the COVID. The best way to not have records of COVID is to not keep records of COVID.
Exactly.
That's my instinct.
Keep the numbers down.
This is just so grotesque, because we know that Kennedy has also gone after Hotez, who has literally developed a vaccine that doesn't put $1 into big pharma's pocket. And so it's really more about vaccines, but continue.
Country, he's not going to do that again. And he wanted to end the wars. He said back then, we don't want to go into Ukraine war. I'd rather make a deal than have a war. So I think that, and he's asked me to do that, and he's asked me to help him end the childhood disease, chronic disease epidemic, and make Americans healthy again.
And if given the power to do that, what'll you do?
That's unclear, because there's no, at this point,
Pause it for a second.
Thank you.
The plan? Well, that's the part. But the slogan, we've got the slogan.
Yeah, there's plenty of time for actually
We're gonna make American children healthy again, and we're gonna do this by maybe hats for everybody. We're certainly not going to expand, let's say, child poverty programs. We're not gonna do anything of that sort. We're not going to have the power of the regulatory state make sure that there's no food deserts. We're not going to provide funding for cities and municipalities and states to create state-owned supermarkets to make sure that there's no food deserts. We don't believe in, because this is what Kennedy's been pushing now, right? That things like climate change and things like COVID were just ways of a regulatory state to be authoritarian. Well, how are you're going to have the regulatory state take, let's say, soda machines out of schools? Are you going to do what they did in New York and say you can't sell, a 47-ounce slushy soda or whatever it is, which has been shown to help the health of people, or to outlaw, certain types of essentially like the plastic that they put in saturated fats? I mean, there's no plan, because there's no plan. It's just Kennedy coming in and going and picking who does not believe in vaccines. You are now one of my potential candidates. Go ahead.
Clear, because there's no, at this point, thank you. Like I said, I'm on the transition committee, and there's no, we don't have, I don't have a post for myself that's picked out. I know that I'm going to be deeply involved in helping to choose the people who can run FDA and NIH and CDC in a way that restores public health rather than.
Can you imagine if you're at FDA or NIH and Bobby Kennedy all of a sudden? I mean, they must be dying. They must be dying.
But I'll bring in people to run those agencies like Callie Means, like Casey Means.
You think they're gonna, they have nightmares about that.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, and they should.
Just riffing. Just two dudes riffing.
Casey Means is a I guess, an internet doctor. She's got a book called Good Energy. She's a New York Times bestseller. Do you think she's going to go in and run the FDA? Do you think she has expertise in running a big agency? Do you think that she's going to be like, oh, this is going to be my full-time job now. I'm not going to be a multi-million-dollar author. I mean, this is just it's grotesque. It's so grotesque.
It's functionally not the exact equivalent of Trump appointing Scott Pruitt to head the EPA, which is just like, it's under this guise of like talking about regulatory capture, where you can't make that same case for the green energy capturing the EPA. I mean, at least in terms of having any credibility, but I'm sure Trump will try. It's the same thing. It's just like saying that regulatory bodies, it's not just that we can improve them and do the things that you describe, it's that they need to be essentially dismantled. And like, to make even your point, Sam, the hydroxychloroquine, the FDA has hydroxychloroquine goes through a process with with the Food and Drug Administration and then it's categorized by what kind of use is acceptable and which kind of use is not acceptable, and if it's safe and if it's not. I mean, I think like even certain testosterone replacement that perhaps some RFK I know has admitted that he uses quite regularly, and his face is consistently red, which would be consistent with that regular usage. Though that goes through regulatory bodies to determine whether or not that's acceptable, or what levels people should be consuming and what can be prescribed. But so he engages with these substances that go through this regulatory process all the time. It's just when you nail it down, it's all about vaccines. It's just about vaccines.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we should just dwell on the Nuzzy stuff. This New York Post article, RFK Jr. may sue Olivia Nuzzy after she bombarded him with increasingly pornographic pics and videos. Now, the timeline will play itself out. I imagine this is probably going to get litigated. It is against the law to share explicit pictures of someone sent to you with other people without their consent. And I would say that this plausibly looks to me like somebody is guilty of breaking revenge porn laws and is going on the offense. There's
he shared the photos?
Again, all this specific case will be litigated, but back to the Vanity Fair piece where he was accused of sexually assaulting a babysitter half his age when he was 50. When Kennedy was married to his second wife, Mary Richardson, he was known to text other damning images to friends as well of nude women. Those friends assumed Kennedy himself had taken the pictures, but they didn't know whether the subjects had consented to having their genitalia photographed, let alone shared with other people. When one friend lost his phone, he panicked that somebody might discover the images.
I'll tell you, I would bet that the lawsuit does not happen.
Yeah.
And I would bet that this is a story for consumption by one person. And that is at home. I mean,
Cheryl Hines.
Yes, I have suspected that, it would be interesting to see if he's going to be on the campaign trail much longer. Maybe she's given him you get 60 days and then you're done. But this is part of the story. It was not me. She was so obsessed with me that I couldn't even, this is the part that doesn't make any sense. Like, what is it like? Bombarded him with increasingly pornographic pictures. All right, so he's investigating a possible lawsuit, right? I mean, if you got a lawsuit, you got a lawsuit. I don't know what the suit would be, but according to a mutual friend, she allegedly bombarded him with increasingly pornographic photos and videos. Well, what does that mean? Increasingly, like, just block her. Kennedy has hired security expert Gavin DeBecker, whose job is to create probably this story. DeBecker said this had nothing to do with romance. He was being chased by porn.
Oh, don't you love it when porn is just hiding behind you at every corner, just following you around?
So Nuzzy emailed him, according to Krauss, who is a mutual friend on their Substack. And she writes that she had tricked RFK into unblocking her. And then I guess sent increasingly high amounts of porn.
I'm sure he didn't want any of that. You know, his credibility on this front's a little undercut by his extremely well-documented past.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't believe this for a second.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.